Woodrow. Bob, can you get Woodrow? There's Dale. Dale, can you hear me?
I hear you. There
Yay.
we go. You hear me?
Yes.
All right, that's not too bad.
Well, thank you, first of all.
I only would do this. I would only do this for joy. That's funny because Loretta's like, "Wow, I'm surprised you're doing that because I don't usually, do sort of like the Skype call things like that." And I'm like, "Well, for joy, I'll do anything." So.
Oh, thank you. It really is such an honor. You have touched my life in ways that I just cannot even express.
That's vice versa. Actually, I'm looking at two of your paintings right now.
Oh, really?
So one over there and one here, so, in the room I'm in.
Yeah, and this right here, this is the result of that second painting you got, the All of Me.
Yeah.
It has taken longer to manifest than I thought it would. But, I had some things to take care of. My soul decided to come and fully occupy my body for the first time in my life, I think. And, that involved having a heart attack and getting all that blockage literally and metaphorically out. But that weekend 2 years ago, just this past weekend, it was very, very profound, and I had such a shift, and I'm doing what I intended to do that weekend. I am now doing it, and part of that is the Fruits of the Spirit workshop that I'm doing right now, and our fruit changes every week, and today we started on love. And I know you know love, and I'm just gonna open it up to you, and whatever is in your heart to share, please do. And yeah, I want to give, in the group, I want to give people a taste of each of the fruits that I believe are already within us. And really all we have to do is cultivate them.
Yeah.
And with love being like the mother of all fruits. So let it rip.
Well, I'd say even prior to cultivations, the recognition, that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to, the primary word for love in Aramaic, in Yeshua's language, unfortunately is usually translated as mercy. Like in the fifth beatitude where it says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." In Aramaic, it sounds like this. That word rachma, or rachme, or rachmane, is that primary word for love there. There's quite a few words for love in Aramaic. Different ones have different meanings slightly. But rachma is the same as what you would hear in the East as Rama. Sometimes it manifests as Ramana. That Ra sound in most languages means a shining forth of heat and light. The Hum sound in the middle of Rachma, it was the old Hebrew word for womb. Womb, not just physical womb, but the container, the vessel that holds the essence of divinity. One would call that, in Old French, the word was Graal, which eventually became Grail. People are out looking for some sort of holy bloodline, not realizing that we are the earthen vessel that holds the essence of divinity. It's us. And if you're looking outside for some miraculous blood, you've missed the entire point of the whole of divinity. But you've got that shining forth of light and heat from the inner womb. It also means the center point of the being, the still point of the being. And then the final word of Rahma, that Ma sound, is the sound most often uttered by a child when referring to the maternal figure in their life in cultures and languages across the world. Even if it's not in their language, as the word mother, children tend to say Ma. There's even some monkeys and some birds that say Ma. So you've got Rahma, that word for love in Aramaic, is essentially like a shining forth, radiating forth of light and heat from the inner womb. It's a birthing forth. And one of the things I often say to people, like as an example in healings that I've done, I'm not crazy about the word healing. I like what Ernest Holmes said. He said, there's nothing to heal, only truth to be revealed. But like in the water healings and things, the anointing, the different processes that I go through with groups of people, I often tell them that when I stand in front of someone, there's actually a whole section in my book, in Echoes of an Ancient Dream, where I talk about the first time I ever did a water healing ceremony, not knowing what the heck it was. And people were falling down and passing out and sobbing and telling. Right in the first one, someone said that they had spinal cancer cured. And I'm like, what do I do with that? Where am I supposed to? But I started noticing that when I'm in front of someone and Rahma is coming through me, that shining forth, that radiating forth of light and heat from the inner womb, the center point of my being, it didn't necessarily mean that the other person was going to throw their arms around me and just give me a big sloppy kiss on the cheek. What that really meant was that I'd now become a catalyst, that radiance of light and heat, that cosmic divinity, that cosmic love that's shining through me is now a catalyst that's going to basically cause their energy body to open. Their body temple will open up, and whatever frequencies are dormant in that temple, they're all of a sudden going to start speaking. And they may not necessarily lean toward me and say, oh my God, I love you so much. But what actually could happen is they could become horrified because it could resonate something, that a bad experience as a child. They may not know what's resonating. And what's important for me is to stay, not to hold the space, but to allow that space and allow whatever's resonating and allow myself to be open. Because if I'm in front of someone that's got some kind of an healing issue that needs healing, I don't need to, it doesn't help me to know what it is. It doesn't help at all. It's like if I have any residue or any resonance of that issue in me, it has to fly out of me first. It has to recalibrate in me before I can do that for them. And 9 out of 10 times, I'm not aware of what the energy even is. It just happens because I'm not in time and space when that's going on. I'm just kind of in the open space, or I'm in eternity. I'm in the portal, and I'm birthing all that forth through there. I'm allowing it to birth forth. I'm not birthing it, if you want to get technical. It's all about being open, and it's all about allowing. And that's really, for me, I'm not trying to define love per se, but for me, it's really about that openness, that space, and allowing whatever needs to speak in the moment to speak. And, you know, as an example, people can look around the world now and say, you know, everything's falling apart. And I'm like, nothing's falling apart. Nothing that's real is falling apart. Things are being revealed. The veils are burning away. You know, the only reason we have good and bad is because we've somehow created these personas or veils, and we've put it in between the masculine and the feminine, between the light and the dark. And we say that this is good and this is bad, or we say that positive is good and negative is bad. There's nothing true about any of that, because if you go deep enough, there's no positive, there's no negative, there's not even really a masculine and a feminine. But even saying that, as the feminine is allowed to express more after being basically pushed down and squashed away for thousands of years, what some people are feeling right now feels like love, and what other people are feeling feels like insanity and pain and suffering. And that's the whole thing. I think the challenge that we do is we think that love means roses and sunshine, etc., not realizing that that's a judgment that closes us off to the actual experience, which is that openness. Like, imagine the birth of your own child. You're not sitting there going, well, this one's good enough. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll keep this one. You're not going through all those judgments. You're just, and that's love. That's really what it is. And it doesn't really matter how we define it, but it definitely matters that we have an intimate awareness of it. So.
So the Rahma that you were speaking of, is that the same as with the Kuba and the Rahma?
Yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, Kuba would be a love that's considered to be intentional love, and I'll explain that. Rahma is more of a love of attitude. It's a love of being, I guess you could say, like something that you're not kind of doing it intentionally. You're actually allowing it to happen. It's just happening through you. You could say it's a deeper form. Kuba, interestingly, when Yeshua said, love your enemies, first of all, there's no real word for enemy in Aramaic in the way that we think of enemy. That word enemy, what it actually means in Aramaic is those who we basically restrict or constrict. Great, my phone's going off, so I'll put it under there. Those who you constrict your breath in the presence of. So you're kind of like locked down. Sorry about the ringing. Hopefully Loretto will get that. You're locked down, and you're literally, what's not happening? Your breath's not moving.
Mm-hmm.
So think of those people that walk into the room and you're spiritual with everybody except that one, and you've got the issue with this one person. What actually happens when something's resonating in you that you're trying not to feel, you stop breathing, because that's the way to shut it off. Well, it's the way you think it shuts it off, which just allows it to kind of go back down. When he said love your enemies, what he was really saying was love those that you lock down in the presence of. Your heart skips a beat, you stop breathing, etc. Frequency, vibration, spirit stops flowing. But that word for love there is ahebu, which is that word huba. And huba is in a few different places in the Jesus teachings. Now that's a love, that's an intentional love. The hub sound in Aramaic actually means kind of like taking a couple sticks and rocks and kind of knocking them together to get a spark. So you're creating a spark with the hub sound, and then the oo sound actually means, it's like ing in English. It means basically fan the flame. So you create a spark and fan the flame. So huba is that love that is, you set the intention to do it, you create the spark and you fan that, you allow it to expand. Rahma is something much different. Rahma there's no amount of intention in it. It's almost the exact opposite, where you're just allowing yourself to be 100% holy and completely open, and that comes through you. It organically unfolds through you. So
And
it's much of a different cat. Is that a cat or
that's a dog. That's one of the
a dog?
two dogs.
Well, mine's on the other side of the house, so
The cats are just kind of spread out. So the Rahma kind of stems forth from the Kuba. It just...
Yeah, you could say actually that Kuba is the intention, and through having that intention and fanning the flame, Rahma is allowed to flower. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
You can't get that into Greek, although there's the closest thing you could get in Greek to Rahma would be agape. But agape doesn't even quite encompass what's there in Aramaic, but that's kind of the way it was. From spoken Aramaic into written Greek, you had something that was like this, that as soon as it went into Greek, from Aramaic into Greek, it just got squashed into a little garden hose, and so much of the meaning was just instantaneously lost. And then you squeeze it down into Latin, then you squeeze it down into Old English and Middle English and Modern English, and forget it, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah, the difference between what I learned in the Southern Baptist Church that Jesus said, and through your work, especially like the energy in the words. I mean, it's just such an incredible difference. And the reason I know that you are onto something is because you say it's very hard to translate the Aramaic, because of so many different factors. But the reason I know that your interpretations are so spot on is because they open my heart. it's like, yes, yes, yes. And then I apply them in my life and they work. You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, it's meant to be tongue in cheek funny, but I tell people, people get with theology, I feel like they walk up, theological scholars, biblical language scholars, they get right to the edge in a lot of cases. In their best moments, they get right to the edge and then they never go off the cliff. And it's like they end up with this theological nut. Theology, it can become it's just not possible to wake up within theology. Theology is this little nut at the center. And I tell people, it's a little explicit, but I tell people I'm cracking Jesus's nuts, because I'm trying to get that nut that's locked in theology and religion and crash it. And once I crack that puppy and it opens up, then the experience is there, and you know that you're done. That you've responsibly translated when it goes like that, and it's almost like your breath catches, and and Loretta's seen me looking at like phrases or verses or even entire gospels or Gnostic gospels for decades, like up to 20 years, that she's seen me looking at stuff, and all of a sudden one day just the right piece of information comes in. I learn one more nuance about a root sound, or maybe I'm in the right meditative or prayer state of being, and all of a sudden I see it and it pops. And she's seen me looking at that same phrase for 10 or 20 years, and all of a sudden I'm crying and I'm laughing and I'm in total euphoria. And I mean, that for me, that's why I do this. I do it. And unfortunately I don't get to do that as much as I'd like to, because I'm always having to do what needs to be done I don't want it to sound like it's an albatross around my neck, but to feed the family, etc. It's like I look forward to a day when I'll be able to know that financially things are set enough and enough people are hearing what I'm doing, that I can crank out the books that I want to crank out and the Blu-rays and the DVDs and have online content and still be able to sit down and still do translating and dig into some ancient texts. And I mean, one thing people are constantly begging me about is to retranslate all the words of Jesus. And I'm like, if you knew not only how many gazillions of sources there are, but just if people realized how long it took just to do a single line. People will send me something, and if it's a close friend, I'll send them back like a basic translation of something. But people think, what did it say, blah, blah, in this verse? And it's like they think that it's just a matter of like, translating Spanish into English, but it's not. Because you need to be able, like I said, to crack the nut. And there's just something at the center of that. And it's like, I know that when it lights me up, it'll light somebody else up too. Not everybody, just like when I was talking about Rachma, not everybody that has it right there in front of them is going to get it. Some people will hear it and they're going to go, I don't know. I don't understand. And they'll put their hand up occasionally in an event and almost challenge me, like, prove it to me. And I'm like, if it's not your time, it's not your time. I used to say if you're not ready, but then that's kind of a judgment. But it's like if this isn't your moment, maybe it'll be the next one. And sometimes those people come back to me a year or two later and say it popped finally. But it's just about being open. See, that's the thing. You were open.
Yeah.
We're open.
Yeah. Now you were talking about that spark that you feel when you have these realizations and you crack the nut, and I was thinking about and you mentioned agape, the Greek word for one of the types of love. Now, what about the Greek word eros?
I knew you were going to say eros. I knew it was coming.
So how, did Jesus ever refer to that type of love?
Well, yeah. And as a matter of fact, a better word, and it's a word that's all over a lot of my teachings lately, a better English word would be ecstasy. When people hear, bless their hearts, people just don't, including full-blown supposed biblical experts, they don't know that they don't know. One of the core, subjects of a lot of my work over the last few years has been ecstasy. And it's amazing because, I mean, a mentor of mine when I was in my late teens into my early to mid 20s was Gabrielle Roth. Gabrielle Roth is the woman, we lost Gabs about 3 years ago to cancer, but she wrote, her first book was Maps to Ecstasy. And I was 19 when I first met her. And she was the one that created the 5 rhythms: flowing, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. If you've ever heard of ecstatic dance, most of that is influenced by her work. It all came out of that, what Gabs was doing. But I'd never thought it until I met her. I'm 19 years old, how scared I was of something like ecstasy. Eros would be, equivalent to people. I don't even like to use erotic, even though it comes from eros in Koine Greek, because people have so many judgments about the word erotic. Even the word ecstasy people have issues with. And I'll often have at my events and I'll say, how many people experience ecstasy on a daily basis? And you see a couple of hands go up and some go really high. And I'm like, okay, maybe some of those are lying or they don't know what I mean. But other ones, you see the hand go up and then go back down, then goes up and then it goes back down. And I often am like intrigued by that. It's like, is it because they're not sure? And sometimes I'll ask, or is it because they feel that they're not supposed to feel that? There's something bad about it. And I mean, when you start getting into sexual abuse and all, like as an example, Harvey Weinstein and all this stuff that's across the news right now, it's like, and everybody's like, I just happened to see where, who was it? Oh, Jane Fonda said she heard about it like a year ago and didn't say anything because she thought it wasn't her place. And then all of a sudden, she comes out today and she was like, I have no idea how that happened because I always felt myself to be someone that would stand up. Bill Cosby, whatever. It's just one of those interesting things where nobody wants to talk about it. But here's the thing. It's not that they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to rock the boat. It's not that they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to lose their job. That might seem like it, but what it really is because they just don't feel comfortable is not the word. They do not feel at home and or at peace with ecstasy in their own lives. And of course, when you talk about eros, it doesn't have anything to do with the wacky stuff that we're seeing about in the news the last few days. It has to do with us being able to have that ecstasy that comes in from the core of the being, which in Gnosticism and in the Magdalene teachings, that was called the bridal chamber. The bridal chamber is where the masculine and the feminine come together exactly 50-50 in perfect balance. And when that happens, the masculine and the feminine are transcended. The result of that is that the Christos, the Christ energy, the serpent, moves through what was called Magdalita, which is the womb, which is the grail. So the essence moves through the container, you could say, which is exactly the same as the Kundalini rising up in the central pillar, up through the chakra system. And most of us don't know what to do when those kinds of experiences happen, because especially in our culture and especially in what's called Christianity, which has absolutely nothing to do with the Jesus teachings whatsoever, there's so much shame around it. There's so much lockdown. There's so much guilt. There's so much fear that as soon as someone starts to feel it, they get so baffled, confused about what they're supposed to feel or not supposed to feel, whether it's good or bad. So many people don't even know what they feel anymore. And I see so much of the homophobia in, again, Christianity, which is not Christian in any way. And all that is, the louder somebody's screaming about somebody next to them that has a different sexual orientation, all that person's doing is revealing that it's inside of them as well. And they're not comfortable with the expression of that. So when I see Pat Robertson screaming homophobic slurs, I'm like, hey, buddy, if you've got issues with it, you need to learn to basically, come to know yourself. And what more beautiful self-balancing system could there be than after 2,000 plus years of that masculine misogyny and control, of the obsessive focus on physicality and words written on a page and precepts and fences to live within? What more beautiful system could there be than after thousands of years of that, it's found a way to bring more feminine essence through masculine humans and more masculine essence through feminine humans, so that those of us that are mature enough spiritually and conscious enough, we might recognize that masculine and feminine has nothing to do with innies and outies. It has nothing to do with the physical body whatsoever. It has to do with essence. And that eros and or that ecstasy is found at the center point when we're in the balance between the light and the dark, the masculine, the feminine, what one would call good and bad, awake, asleep, the past, the future, wholly, fully present right now in the moment. But our morals and all this other crap that's thrown on top. My wife, Loretta, for years, she's been a model, and she does sacred sensuality modeling, and it's amazing. People come up to her at my events and they're like, oh my God, I judged you. I thought you were a slut, and my head turned. People say this, and she's like, huh? And they're like, well, I judged you from your photos. Now I realize you're nothing like what I thought. And it's like, sounds like an offhanded compliment, but what they're really saying is, she's not what was in their head. They're fighting against what's here. They're fighting against the indoctrination. And again, that's another primary block to eros, to allowing the ecstasy to happen. People, Gabrielle used to say that people are kind of okay with feeling good, but they're not okay with feeling too good or too ecstatic or feeling too much happiness or bliss in their life. They always feel like they're having to rein it in. And I mean,
Is it
all
that,
the conditioning.
is it that too good to be true thing,
That's a part of it.
Yeah.
Or just you're not supposed to feel that is the other thing. I realize I'm pressing
Oh,
there.
because yeah, because of the shame part.
Shame's the ultimate frequency
Yeah.
killer. Um, channeling through Judy Sion, Mary Magdalene actually said that the ultimate energy, basically the ultimate energy destroyer for the Ka, the energy body, which Yeshua called it the Haikla, the energy body, that what was translated as temple, the ultimate destructive force in the energy body is shame. And it's amazing because Christianity is based on shame. Most modern Christianity, especially of women. And of course, the priests aren't allowed to procreate or be married in Catholicism. Maybe they're going to open up to that slightly, but they still won't let women become priests. Interesting thing, because in the last 10 years across Europe, they've been finding all of these tunnel passages between monasteries and nunneries where the monks and or priests and the nuns were getting together, having sex in these trenches down in these tunnels. The nuns would end up having babies, and they would go back into the tunnels and break the heads off of these children, literally snap their necks after they were born, and just throw them into a pile and throw lime on top of it. And that's the result of not allowing someone to feel what is an authentic frequency pattern. Eros is a perfect example that moves through the energy body and the shaming. So when someone's shamed about it, it gets squashed down inside. And I tell people all the time, your suffering is always in 100% direct proportion to your resistance. So these people go into a suffering pattern, and what do? If they're not allowed to feel it, they start looking for children, and they start, cancel the thought, jumping on top of female runners, in parks at like 9 p.m. and teenage girls or whatever, all this wild stuff that's going on. And then, of course, you put that across the news media, and all these people that are not breathing, that have not come to terms with their own sexuality, as an example, it starts stimulating things that happen to them. And all of a sudden, they're having these feelings. They don't know why they're feeling it, but because they have shame about it, they try to shove it down. And when you try not to feel it, the process of trying not to feel it amplifies it, makes it more intense than it was before. And now, since you're trying not to feel it, it becomes something that we would call bad. We judge it as bad. I shouldn't be feeling it. And then basically that's where those addictive, bizarro, sexuality things come from, is because we're told it's bad, it's not good. But we don't even know what good or bad even means anymore. It's all so jumbled up. So
yeah. Which is evident in so much of our society today.
Yeah.
Right in your face. So we've got about 10 more minutes, and I wanted to see if anybody had any questions. But if you were to give one tip or one tool or one practice to once the the fruit of love is recognized and understood, how best to cultivate it?
To be aware of spirit in your life. And I've got to add on to saying that, like, there's a lot of people that are other spiritual teachers, whatever, quote unquote, who I see some saying they don't use the word spiritual anymore. And I'm thinking, what an unfortunate thing. They aren't teaching it. They don't know what spirituality is well enough to teach it. But I understand what a lot of them are saying. You know, there's no such thing as the line between spiritual and unspiritual, or in love, out of love. A lot of we put these lines up that are actually not there. But what I say is to come back to what in Latin was called spiritus, which Jesus never heard the word spirit in his life. The word he heard was ruha in Aramaic, or ruach in Hebrew. What that means is frequency or vibration. It means an elemental force, okay? Forces that expand and contract. That includes what we would call spirit. It includes the rise and fall of the breath. It includes the beating of the heart. It includes, heat could be considered rucha. Electricity, magnetism, nuclear forces would fit it, cosmic expansion. So what I tell people, there's no more ultimate way to cultivate love than to simply be aware of the frequency and vibration in, within, and through your life. That means to be aware of just stop and be aware of the rise and fall of your own breath. Stop. Be aware of the beating of your heart. Be aware of the beats. Be aware of the spaces between. Be aware of the rise and fall of the breath and the still point between. Be aware of the movement of air across your skin. That's, again, the same word, rucha, frequency or vibration. Be aware of the sounds. Like, as an example, 2 minutes before I got on this call with you, the moving truck showed up at my neighbor's house, backing up on the mountain road, backing up in reverse. And I'm like, oh man, these guys have great timing. Actually, I can't really hear it that much right now. I think he's done. But to simply allow oneself, and I'll say a great teacher for this is Eckhart Tolle. People take him for granted because he sold so many books, but literally we're in the presence of someone that can explain things that many people find unexplainable. And Eckhart is such a precious teacher with his creepy little laugh and his Argyle sweaters. Just to be able to cultivate the awareness of the simplicity of life and realize that there's nothing we need to live up to. There's no precepts. There's no religious ideas that we need to live up to. Those things were set in place for people that were not awake. Those were set in place because the culture, a lot of the people running the culture felt people couldn't handle it, but you have an innate guidance system. The maps that we had for years don't work anymore. Throw them out. All those great philosophies, and they're important on some level, but what's most important is that we allow ourselves to spend more time in stillness. We allow ourselves to be aware of the pure frequency and vibration in our lives. I just said on a mentoring call I did with one of my participants in Europe today, in the UK, I told her, I said, people will get more knowledge and experience sitting by a stream for 1 hour than they will from reading 100 spiritual books. They can't touch it with 1,000 spiritual books. And it's getting back to the purity of life, the frequency, the vibration. Even if you live in New York City, I used to live in Manhattan in the East Village, and I'd walk out in the morning, and if I was in a crappy mood, I'd have a crappy day. If I was in a good mood, I would have an amazing day because it would mirror back to me. And again, when you're just aware of all of the sounds and the movement of air on the skin and being as somatic as possible, not denying the body like Christianity tries to do, but being as fully in the body as possible, that's how we transcend the body and get into that deep aspect of love that we can't explain. Because if you can explain it, you're not there yet. And that's the whole thing. You got to get to the experiential core of it beyond the shell of theology or ideas and precepts, etc. You got to get to the place where you go, and if you just open the door and you allow that door to stay open, you stay on that pure level of frequency and vibration, your life's going to change. We've been duped into thinking we have to change our thoughts to change our life, but you've never had an accurate thought in your life. Your thoughts, just by their nature, are fragmented. everything in this world is fragmented by its nature. We need to be able to transcend that, realize your thoughts change your dream. They change your perception of the dream, but the dream's not real in the first place. You know, and I got to cap it off with what I always say from St. Francis of Assisi. What you're looking for is what is looking.
Oh, and
That hits it all.
that is so reassuring, you know.
Yeah, it is. We're trying so hard to be something we already are. My podcast, Navigating the Cosmic Shift, and we just did the third episode of my audio podcast, and I start right off in the first one saying, you know, we're trying so hard to be something we already are, which creates a stress pattern, a suffering in our lives that's based on absolutely nothing that's real, because you already are that. And you don't need to live up to that. You don't need to somehow become more of that. It's just a matter of removing those bushel baskets off of the light, all those blocks that say we're not. That's our real work. It's not becoming more of anything. You can't become more of something that you already are as an eternal being. It's just removing that stuff, forgiving all the garbage from the system that says you're not, you know?
Yeah,
So,
with love, with love.
yeah, and that's why
Yeah.
if there's any reason we're not able to show fully up as love, it's because we don't feel it about ourselves. So,
well, here's to loving ourselves and experiencing ourselves as we truly are. I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions. We got about 4 minutes. Rosie, I see you're here on your iPhone. But I don't know.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hi there.
All right. Did you have a
Hi.
question?
You can hear me, but you can't see me, correct?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Your beautiful faces.
Hi, Dale.
hi.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. I've got notes. I can't even think of questions. I've got so much to take in.
Maybe that's good.
My name is Rosie. Rosie.
Hi, Rosie.
Rosie
Hey
is
there.
one of my besties.
Cool.
Yeah. And Alan, did you have a question, or Ematroni?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Alan.
Yeah. Okay, I'm curious how Dale would interpret fear and its limitation of love and light.
Great question. Well, you know, sort of a preface to that would be in Hebrew and Aramaic, a lot of people would refer as an example to the Old Testament, and they talk about how we were told to fear God. That word in Aramaic is tedkul. And what tedkul means is not fear in the sense that we think. Tedkul, not necessarily, and I'll end this, you know, with what you're talking about, how it limits love, but tedkul wouldn't be a fear in the way that we think of it. What that means is essentially not that we're supposed to fear God, but an example I give is that, you know, there's a child, like a 2-year-old child, playing in the front lawn of someone's home, and the mother sees that the kid's ball is rolling out into the street, and here's a car doing 40 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and the mother like launches 30 feet and does this superhuman thing and grabs the child back and pulls him back out of the street before he gets hit by the car. I often say to people, when does she feel the fear? She feels the fear after, okay? Well, that feeling that you feel on the way to the car, I don't mean necessarily just fight or flight, but when the energy body is wide open, it would be called closer to ecstasy or all. Like, how can you say, Dale, that ecstasy is something you feel when racing to grab your child from being smashed? But that's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. When the energy body opens like that, that's how we were supposed to feel for God, to be firing on all cylinders, wide open. Now, fear, I think the acronym's perfect. False evidence appearing real. And what fear actually is would be when our energy body the tempo gets to what I call entropy, which is a physical system. It gets to the point of entropy, a point of possibly breaking down. I call it the evolutionary moment of truth. If something's resonating in the system that we're not comfortable with the way it feels, and we're trying to shut that frequency down, whatever it is that we're not comfortable with, that's where the fear is coming from. It's us trying not to feel something inside of ourselves. The person in front of us is nothing more than a catalyst. So it seems like we can't love them, but the truth of the matter is that we're not allowing what's moving in us. And that's the only reason relationships break down, is because we start having veils. You know, in the Quran, it says that Allah says to Muhammad that there's 1,000 veils between you and me, yet there's only one between me and you. Lift that veil. And that's really what it is. The fear is the resonance of stuff inside of ourselves that we're trying not to feel. And usually we're not conscious of that process. But because it's happening when that other person's in front of us, we think it's their fault. But all they're doing is really not even intentionally. All that's happening is their energy, their essence is shaking loose stuff inside of ourselves. If we can allow ourselves to feel that and allow it to voice, we can love so wholly and so fully, kind of like, you know, the love of a parent for a child that transcends anything we can possibly imagine. But we have to allow ourselves to be open for that to happen. So.
No, I like that.
I got to say too, you know, another mentor I had when I was back in my teens was Jerry Jampolsky. And the first book that Jerry gave me was Love is Letting Go of Fear. And I mean, if not for Jerry and Ken Wapnick, we wouldn't even know what A Course in Miracles is, because it was those two that really took Helen Schuckman's text out there and got it out there. But just that right there, love is letting go of fear. It doesn't mean that you're turning your back on it, trying not to feel it, but actually that you're allowing whatever it is that you're afraid of to voice itself. Because when we try not to feel what we're in fear of, we actually add more energy into it, and it breaks us down, and it breaks down our relationships, it breaks down our life. But when we allow those things to voice and just allow them to come out, we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, that's when we really get to the true depth of what life is meant to be. And most people, you know, I'd say at least a lot of people are never going to feel that in this particular lifetime. But those of us that are here right now chose to be here at this moment in human history, and we are the ones we've been waiting for. So that's an awesome question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alan. I think we're going to have to wrap it up because Dale.
Yeah, I got to roll, but I'm a little over, but that's okay.
So
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Dale. My heart is yours and Loretta's. Please give her my love.
Oh, absolutely.
And
it went really fast. That was really fast. So anyway, thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you. All right. I love you.
I love you too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.